Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Let's get this started. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Let's get this started.
Ooh,
Welcome
fire.
in, guys. Welcome in. Let's get this started.
Tom. Ooh, fire.
All right, I like it.
Tom.
Welcome in, though, guys.
Alright, I like it.
Tom.
I was just actually reading your message about
Welcome in,
what
though,
you
guys.
plan to do tonight.
That sounds
Tom. I
fire,
was just
Tom.
actually reading your
What?
message about what you plan to do tonight.
That sounds
I like
fire,
it,
Tom.
What?
Uncle Philly, actually, I do agree with you.
I like it,
I'll
What?
actually get to my chart on Spy here. Probably just give it another few minutes or so. Let some traders actually trickle in here.
Just a
Let
quick sec
some
to
traders
see.
actually trickle in here.
Just a
Let
quick sec
some
to
traders
see.
actually trickle in here.
Just a
Let
quick sec
some
to
traders
see.
actually trickle in here.
Sick.
Let some traders
Send
actually
out a quick
trickle in here.
message.
Sick. Send out a quick message.
Alright, there we go. Clutch.
Send out a quick message.
Echo?
Alright, there we go.
That's
Clutch.
odd. That's odd.
That is correct. That was actually on. So how'd everyone do today? Tom, what'd you do today? Did you really trade anything today? Unless you just did the scalper. I'm pretty sure you just did the scalper. Just a few minutes more, guys. Let some more traders trickle in here. Go Philly, you bought. I'm assuming you bought probably tech stocks, right? That's more than likely what you ended up buying. Traded spy calls. I can't blame you on that. I know that the bear den wanted to get happy. I think that was when we actually had that little rising wedge action. The bear den started to get happy, and then that little drop that we had midday pretty much just got bought up real quick. EQT calls, BTU, and ET calls. I like that. That's a solid day, actually. A really solid day. Can't complain about that. That was a hell of a day that you had, Tom. Really nice. That's a solid. That's really what you want to see every day, just getting high quality trades. But then sometimes we end up FOMO into things, and that's usually when it ends up bad. But it is what it is. All right. We should get some more people trickling in here, but I want to say today, that was a hell of a recovery that we pretty much got overall for the day. I think that we ended up, from what we saw with futures last night, I think everyone was pretty much prepared for the worst today, but that pretty much got bought up rather quickly. And that's really what we just been seeing is that these overnight swings, weekend swings have just been so drastic. And sometimes when we wake up, it's usually not as bad. But what typically ends up happening is that we get a recovery and then we also get that price action right back to the downside during market hours. But nonetheless, I love the recovery that we had today. It was definitely amazing. I think the close that we ended up having also was definitely a great sign going into tomorrow. Pretty much just looking at the downtrend resistance that I think that the market is actually respected for most of the part. In terms of the fact that we see at the very top of the resistance line, we've rejected perfectly right off of that, acted as resistance. Next one, we pretty much acted as resistance or support here intermediately before our next leg down. Another resistance point, gap down, pretty much recovered right into it, tried to break out of it, just fell right back down again, tapped resistance, and we see the blood. So what I'm looking at for tomorrow is to go right into this resistance yet again. Pretty much puts us close enough towards 440 on SPY here tomorrow. Rather quickly, I think that'll end up happening. I'm just hoping that we don't end up gapping up towards that 440 mark and we get some kind of continuation during the market hour tomorrow morning at the very least, and that way we can play the upside. Otherwise, I do fear that once we get up towards this 440 mark, and that's why I say I don't. I hope it's not towards right at the open. We're gonna see it probably likely just a swift rejection, and we go right back down, and that's what my fear is right now. So I am holding some calls. I pretty much tweeted out the only thing I'm pretty much holding overnight is just some AMD calls, and I'll get to that chart in which what I was pretty much looking at, but I am holding some calls on AMD again, and I'll likely end up, more than likely, I will end up exiting at open tomorrow morning, and that will also be determined depending upon how much SPY actually moves up by tomorrow morning as well. If I see us literally immediately gap up towards 440 tomorrow on SPY, I know that's gonna spell trouble, and I'm gonna end up literally just getting out right at open. But the other thing that pretty much catches my attention If you notice, we do have this little, what I would say is a little expanding, broadening wedge type action that's going on. If I put it in the green, you see that's pretty much looking to play out here. And so that pretty much coincides with the resistance that we're looking at going into tomorrow, and which will reject towards that 440 mark, and we come right back down. So that's another thing that I'll look at. Of course, my zones that I'm watching once we start to fall here, looking between 432 down towards 430. And then I do have a complete flush once we break below this 428 mark. I think that's going to end up being just an elevator down, to say. So those are the levels I'll pretty much be watching. But 440 again is my overall top that I have going into tomorrow. So that's likely going to be my leading indication of when I exit my calls and when I start to scale into my put position, because I'm not going to exactly just go full port in my position in terms of getting into puts. I know that some people early on this morning, we start to see that everyone started to get happy with the puts, thinking that we would get a continuation down following what futures look like from yesterday night. But that wasn't the case. We just saw it get bought right back up. So that being said, I don't want to end up getting in a full position right away. Once we hit that SPY 440, that'll be the point where I start to scale in, and I'll let the course take its action and as I see it uh, move in the direction that I feel it's necessary. All right. But of course, the other thing that's a little bit more concerning as well, and that's why I say I'm gonna scale in also, is that we do have this nice little gap fill here as well, and that's what actually is a little bit more concerning. So if we do get continuation here, granted the fact that's between 444 up towards 446 half, that's what I'm going to be watching for, is this gap fill. And that's why I say I'm going to scale in rather more so, is because I do not want to get caught in the fact that this is going to go right into that gap fill potentially if the market sentiment agrees and we see continuation on the break of this downtrend. Like we see here, we had a continuation of the break of the downtrend, but it ended up faking us right back out. So that's what I'm gonna watch for, and I'll scale in. I'll look for my stop loss to see if we get towards approaching that gap fill. Then I'll likely end up cutting my loss, and I'll wait to re-enter once the gap fill is completed. So that's just a walkthrough of the mindset of what I'm looking at in terms of SPY and how I would go about playing it. But my calls, I'm likely gonna end up taking profits tomorrow morning at open, and I'll let it play out and see how we react to this downtrend resistance before I make my next position tomorrow. All right. So that's pretty much SPY and what I'm looking at. Getting into basically what I am holding in terms of AMD here. Basically, what I was watching for is this little rising wedge action. You can say it's playing out if I pretty much zoom it out here just a bit. And you can see the fact that I'm watching for this little rising wedge action. I do expect us to get one leg higher, in which that'll put us right in towards 127. So about close to about a $2 and some change move that I'll be looking at. So I anticipate that to be a nice little gap up. You can also see pretty much the lines pretty much aligned just perfectly off of the line chart here as well. Supports, resistance off of prior. You see it was resting as a prior support, resistance, resistance, and that is how I aligned right into that 127 mark that I'm looking at for my target. So that's why I ended up getting into this one. The call flow was there also, pretty much sentimented. The buyers were there. So I did see buyers present 125 up to about 130 strike. So if we get over that 127 mark, then I'll reassess to see exactly how high we go. The other thing I did notice is that we do have this gap fill all the way at the top here. I'm not getting FOMO by that though, although that gap is incomplete. So that'll be something that I particularly start to watch for. I'm not going to end up holding my position again for that. That's just a scenario in which I'm giving you what potentially could end up being on watch for continuation. But the other mark in which I was watching as acted as prior support, resistance, you want to say, before, was right around this 127 mark. And that's why that also coincides with that uptrend resistance that I'm also watching. So that low 127 mark as well, I'm looking to take my profits, and I'll walk and wait for SPY to play out for my next directional move. All right. So that's what I was watching with AMD. Other one that I stayed low on Tesla today. I know that Sig pretty much was all over that move today. That definitely was just a hell of a move that Tesla made. It actually, from Friday, it looked like it was going to get some kind of continuation. The strength was going to be there. I saw we are hitting 900 calls on Friday. They literally hit it right at the opening gate today, this morning as well. So I was not surprised by that as well. The other thing is the downtrend resistance, in which you see we have what I want to say is a little broadening, descending broadening wedge action going on here, in which I expect us to pretty much hit our nose on the resistance. Right around this 903 half mark is where I expect us to hit our nose on resistance tomorrow. And that'll be the point of which I watch along with SPY level that I mentioned of 440 to see if we get a reversal or if we end up breaking this resistance and we push even higher. As you see, there's a very tiny gap here as well. That's on watch. A very small tiny gap that we have here on Tesla. So gap is pretty much right around the 918 up towards that 922 mark. And that's also on continuation if we break this resistance. Otherwise, we get up to this 903 mark, I'm going to watch for rejection and I may potentially end up playing the downside on this one if the overall market presents itself in that way. All right. So that's one that I'll keep on watch. But 903 is that mark that I'm looking for. We get a continuation over that, then I'm watching for that 918 to 920, 21 area for that gap fill. All right. So that's one I'll keep a watch on. Another one that I was watching today, I actually took a nice little trade on was Shopify. Shopify just looked textbook. I know that it's actually been beaten up quite a bit, but what caught my attention more so was this little ascending broadening wedge type action that we have going on. You see the little rounding bottom also on a larger degree here as well. So I'm watching for us to get a continuation to the upside here, get a move right into the resistance, as long along with a prior support level in which we saw distribution before a meltdown, back from about a week, 2 weeks ago I want to say, from but that was from February 18th. We saw that little distribution. We tried to hold support and we just fell down. And so that coincides with the resistance off of this wedge action that I'm looking at. So a move towards 724 is what I'm potentially looking at tomorrow. And if we end up gapping up towards that level, that's another spot in which you're looking at towards a reversal. All right. So that's what I'm going to be looking at for that one. 724 right into resistance and right into the prior support in which we fell through and we ended up dropping. And that'll be one that I will definitely keep on my radar. I know that I was actually playing the 700 strike today. That actually went from about, at one point it was, I think about 1100, if you want to say. It actually closed in $2,000 a piece on those 700 calls into the close. So that was a hell of a move. I pretty much mentioned when I was in shop. And I think I was also in Facebook as well at one point, in which Sig was also in Facebook. I think he swung from over the weekend. So those are two pretty much the main winners that I ended up having today was Shop and Facebook. Other one I was keeping an eye on was Apple. We saw, and this was more so the head scratcher to me today was I actually saw Apple and Microsoft pretty much my leading indicators for the tech sector, and they did show relative weakness overall for the market, and that's why I was not swayed that the market was going to go higher until after the lunch hour, and that's when I saw the volume start to ramp up. I started to see the tape really just hit with calls left and right on Microsoft and Apple, and that's when I actually did go in and I identified that we had this little broadening wedge action, and I pretty much bought into of this. So I am looking at this broadening wedge. We're gonna hit our head on some resistance off of this broadening wedge tomorrow, right around the high 165 mark on Apple. And if we get continuation above that 166, I want to say ballpark, then I'm looking at completion of the gap fill, which we pretty much left small amount here, but we left it incomplete, and that would take us towards 166.80 is what I'll be watching for the completion on that gap fill. So that's something I will keep an eye on. I really wanted to end up shorting Apple. That's really what I was anticipating, just because of the fact that we saw the weakness again with Microsoft and Apple. But I am buying into the fact that it got a beautiful close. And so I'll watch for the move, see how it reacts right around this 167. If we get the push towards that gap fill, and then I'll look to short it at that point in time. But I will likely won't short it unless we get that fill to the gap. I'll let it be. But I do like the megaphone action, and I think that actually coincides exactly with what I saw off of Microsoft. The only thing with Microsoft is that this megaphone actually played out a little bit more better. It's a little bit more in a completed phase. If I actually just get the trend line, let's see. Let me just put it through real quick. So you see the better picture. You actually see this one's actually a lot more closer right into its resistance off of this megaphone action. And so this is one that I pretty much, for me, this is already pretty much at resistance. But if we get a break over that resistance point, I am watching 2 points here, watching 301, and next level I'm watching is 303, that low 303 mark. which you see previously is acted as support or resistance before the meltdown. So that's pretty much what I'll be watching with Microsoft as well. I think that pretty much coincides with what we see with Apple, trying to break out of the megaphone action north, and we have a little bit more room to the upside. So that's what I'll be watching with those two. And then just the last one that caught my attention off of the unusual puts that went off for the flow alerts today. I had this massive gap fill, and this was on watch. I did not expect this gap fill to really get filled. And I think at that point, I was watching it right around this low mark here, around that 117. I did not expect this to go for almost a full gap fill. But here we are nonetheless. A nice little rising wedge action, which if you probably look at a larger time frame, will likely look like a bear flag. But I didn't get into puts just yet, just because of the fact that I see a nice little wedge action. Call it a bull flag, call it a wedge, in which that takes us up one leg higher to complete the actual gap fill. So that gap fill will complete here 143.09, and that'll be the point where I'll start to watch this one for puts, just because of the fact that I did see that unusual put. I think that's going to end up paying quite heavy. So I'm gonna be watching this one pretty closely going into tomorrow. I think for my shorts, it's either gonna be Roku or Tesla. To be honest with you, that'll likely be the two that I probably point my attention to in particular. The only thing that pretty much makes me more hesitant with Tesla is you're pretty much going against relative strength and momentum at this point. So Roku pretty much favors me shorting it more so than Tesla. It's just that knowing Tesla, I love how they pay the premium, and I know that it just moves so fluently for me. But I do like the setup on Roku. The unusual puts today, they hit 140s, so basically they are still in the money at this point. And I'll be watching this one once we complete this gap fill at this 143 mark, and we'll go from there. And I'll likely call it out once I end up scaling into this one. I'll call it out on live for you guys. All right. But that's pretty much the names that I was watching in particular that just stood out to me. But other than that, I'll pretty much look for my AMD position, look to exit tomorrow morning at the open. But also watching SPY very closely towards that 440 mark that I've been repeating about. All right. But other than that, ZM is up. I'm sure it's up off of earnings. I saw 100 puts coming in earlier. Actually, it's not up anymore. It's down just about $3.90. So whoever pretty much tried to play calls or puts on Zoom, they basically got Ivy crushed off of that. So that's not very pretty off of that. All right. But other than that, and it actually did look like it was gonna continue to go. And I think when I looked at it earlier, and I didn't highlight it, but it actually had a nice little gap fill here. Maybe we see some upgrades tomorrow morning. I know that Zoom's been pretty much beaten up quite a bit already, so I would not be surprised that we see a recovery off of Zoom here by morning, in which we get some upgrades and then we get a beautiful continuation off of this one. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. All right. But other than that, I think that kind of wraps up what I was looking at here today, guys. So we'll leave it at that. We'll see what market volatility has for us tonight. What headline pretty much will coincide with that movement overnight here, and then we'll pretty much just take it step by step tomorrow morning and reevaluate what the levels are. All right. But other than that, I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning, and we will call it an afternoon. You guys have a good rest of your day. And again, I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning. All right. Have a good one, guys.